Welcome back. I hope all is well. Today we're going to talk about what it's like to start your own private practice versus joining a group practice or becoming part of something like Amwell or Talkspace. People usually dip their toe into private practice by joining another group practice or by joining something like Talkspace or Amwell. And I see this as a good in-between step. Joining a group practice or being a part of something like Talkspace is going to award you a lot more flexibility than, let's say, working for a hospital or an agency setting. You'll probably be able to create your own hours and things like that. However, it's not as free as a private practice that you've established yourself. So you're not establishing the policies and procedures. You're not choosing which EMR you're using, that kind of thing. I mean, all the weight of the private practice falls on you when you establish your own practice. So I'm not here to tell you which one is better, but we will thoroughly go through the pros and cons so that by the end of this video, you will be able to make your own decision about whether or not to start your own private practice or join a group practice. So let's begin. Wait, but before we do, if you haven't done so already, please do go ahead and subscribe down below. Hit the thumbs up button on this video, but only if you want to. There is no pressure. All right, so let's start by talking about the pros of joining a group practice or being part of something like Talkspace or Amwell. And one of the most obvious benefits is that it's very easy to get started. On your end, as someone who's joining a group practice, there are no startup costs. So you're not paying for the EMR. You're not paying for the business entity. You're simply joining. You don't have to pay for malpractice insurance. It's very, very seamless. You typically apply, you get accepted for the position, and then you start. Very seamless, very easy to get started. Another benefit of being part of a group practice is going to be the constant stream of referrals. You're not going to have to depend on yourself to get referrals. So let's just use Amwell, for example. If you join Amwell as a therapist, people are going to come through Amwell as this big umbrella entity and then find their way to you. So people will always be coming to Amwell, considering the size of it, or we can use Talkspace as an example. People will come to Talkspace looking for therapy and then find their way to you. And so you don't have to worry as much about obtaining referrals. There'll be a constant stream coming to the group practice and then down to you. Whereas in private practice, when it's your own practice, you are in charge of finding all the referrals, getting referrals, marketing yourself, and things like that. So joining a group practice is going to have a really big benefit of having this constant stream of referrals. And another benefit that is similar to the first one is that you're going to be provided with all the tools that you need to be a therapist. Although there's not many, you do need things like a medical record. You may need a HIPAA compliant video platform, a way of communicating with clients like email, things like that. And when you work for another group practice, you are going to be provided all of those tools. Well, I think you should be provided all of those tools. So once again, no startup cost. You have all the tools that you need at your disposal. And that's a real big benefit. When you're in private practice on your own, you have to pay for the tools, find the tools, decide which ones work best. Whereas in the group practice, you kind of step into an ecosystem that's already decided on the tools, and you just have to learn how to use them. And speaking of tools, this is a great time to segue into telling you about the sponsor of today's video, and that is Thrizer. Thrizer is a brand new company that is helping therapists establish private practices by providing really, really cool tools, most of which are free. The coolest tools that they have right now is that they provide end-to-end support to help your clients use their out-of-network benefits. This means that you can keep your cash pay rate while also ensuring that your clients can use their out-of-network benefits seamlessly and smoothly. Thrizer will do all of the hard legwork to ensure that your clients are using their out-of-network benefits to be reimbursed for all the therapy sessions that they have. And again, this is completely free for both you as the therapist and the client. You can sign up for free down below. There's a link in the description. And then another benefit is going to be the security. Now, this is sometimes real security or perceived security. So what do I mean by security? So let's say, for example, you are a therapist for Talkspace and someone wants to sue for malpractice. You have Talkspace there to kind of help you and support you through that, to kind of, whatever it may be that went wrong. Maybe it was a Talkspace issue. Maybe it was a group practice issue and not necessarily yours. Well, then the group practice is going to deal with that issue and they're going to help you along the way as well. Whereas if you are in private practice and there's a malpractice lawsuit, it's just you. You have to deal with that and figure that out completely on your own. So it can feel much more secure to be a part of a group practice where there's more providers, there's someone over you supervising you. So that feels more secure. In many ways, this is an extra level of security or accountability. Either way, these are good things, and that is something a group practice will provide you. And then another real benefit of being part of a group practice is getting supervision. So I know as a social worker, you need many hours of supervision to be able to take your LCSW exam. So if you join a group practice, a lot of times the people supervising you will provide you those hours of supervision that are required. So if you're someone who's still trying to obtain clinical hours, or you're working towards your license that allows you to practice independently, a group practice is going to be a great place to obtain those hours. And it's a massive benefit to joining a group practice. And even if you're someone who does not need those clinical hours, a group practice might even offer you the opportunity to have supervision, which is always, always helpful. So let's transition a little bit and talk about the cons of joining a group practice. And the first one is going to be pay. So when you work for a group practice, you are going to be paid much less for your services than if you were to work independently. Now, this is a major factor and one that is not talked about all that often, so let's shed some light on the topic. And so for my own research and talking to people, it seems likely that a therapist might make 45 to 50% less per session than if they were to start their own private practice and see clients that way. That's a pretty significant difference, and one to really think about if you're trying to decide between joining a group practice or starting your own private practice. Another con of joining a group practice is going to be the flexibility. Now, if you're coming from a hospital or an agency setting, joining a group practice is going to be far more flexible. However, if you're going to a private practice that you've started, it's going to be more flexible than even joining the group practice. So for group practices, what I've seen is that you usually get to pick your own schedule and things like that. And this is really great. However, you're usually limited in how much you can choose and how flexible you can be with your schedule. So I've seen a lot of group practices saying something like, you can choose your own schedule, but you have to work one evening a week, or you have to work one weekend per week, something like that. So sometimes there's a caveat in the schedule. Also, there'll sometimes be a minimum. I have seen other group practices say you have to work a minimum of 25 hours, a minimum of 10 hours, whatever it may be. So there is still some limit to your flexibility. And so there is quite a big difference in the flexibility between a group practice and a private practice. Much, much more flexible in your own private practice. And so another limiting factor about joining a group practice, which falls in line with the flexibility issue, is that you don't get to choose your own practice policies and procedures. You most likely will come under the group practice's policies and procedures. So for example, if you want to establish a late cancellation policy, you can do that in private practice. However, if you're in a group practice, you usually will assume the group practice's policies and procedures. And most of the time, this is probably fine, but it limits your flexibility. And then another con of being part of the group practice is that you may not be able to develop your own niche or specialty. It could be an area of interest, a population you really enjoy working with, something like that. And what I've seen is that when you join a group practice, you essentially come under that niche or that specialty. Or perhaps it's something like Amwell or Talkspace, where it's very, very broad. So you're kind of a general practitioner at that point. You may just come under that umbrella and then follow the specialties of the group practice. This is actually really, really good if you're trying to gain experience, but if you are trying to establish a specialty or a niche, well, then it's going to be a bit limiting. In your private practice, you can establish your own niche, blaze your own trail. You're really free to choose whichever path you want. And another downside of joining a group practice is that there's going to be limited opportunity for growth and expansion. So for example, once you join a group practice, you're essentially going to be a therapist within that group practice seeing clients. However, you won't have the opportunity to start your own group practice, or again, maybe you won't have the opportunity to develop a special niche. But if you're in your own private practice, you can expand and start your own group practice. You can grow and do other business ventures as well. So in your own private practice, there is much more flexibility for growth and expansion for the long haul. And I do find this to be a really helpful benefit to having your own private practice. So just to give you a few of my own thoughts to wrap up, as someone who has done research on both joining group practices and has now started their own private practice, I do want to share with you a couple of things that I have thought about. Now, the first is this. The reason why I wanted to start a group practice was mostly because I was very scared to go out on my own. And so the group practice, all that they offered and provided, made that fear much less, almost non-existent, because they provided the tools, there was no startup cost, I didn't have to figure out malpractice insurance, no business entity, you get the point. The group practice eliminated all the fear that I had about starting a private practice. However, now that I've started a private practice, I have realized that all of those fears that I had before starting were actually not that bad and things that you can do, that you can learn. You are totally capable of learning how to establish a business entity. You're totally capable of figuring out which EHR software you want to use. So just as an encouragement, most of the fears that the group practice eliminates are actually not things you need to be that scared of, because you can definitely do it. So if I was to go back in time, I would jump straight into private practice because I now know that those fears were not such a big deal. However, if you're someone who needs supervision, or you're someone who just wants to pick up an extra shift and not start a full-on private practice, then a group practice might be a great option. However, if you're someone who's really scared and just fearful of starting your private practice, I would encourage you to think about what we talked about today and then decide what one might be best for you. I do think that a group practice is a great stepping stone, but again, it's totally up to you. Hopefully this video is helpful for you. Hopefully you learned something. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you soon.